One of the most underrated features in QuickBooks Online, aside from, of course, the ability to build out automation and to share information with all stakeholders who need it, is the ability to attach documentation directly to transactions. Now, what does this mean? This means that we can attach PDF documents, Excel spreadsheets, images, and other document types to almost every kind of transaction that we're entering in QuickBooks Online. Now, this might sound like an extra or unnecessary step, and for certain types of transactions, it absolutely is. You certainly don't have to provide an attachment for every single transaction that you're recording in your file. But there are times when it can be really convenient and sometimes necessary to attach documentation to transactions. One example might be if you make a large purchase, such as a vehicle purchase or a computer or something like that. It might be really nice to go ahead and attach the purchase documentation to that so that when your CPA or possibly an auditor is reviewing the books down the road, they have the ability to see exactly what the transaction was for and to have that additional documentation so they know they're reporting things correctly. The most extreme example that I've had of this is I actually worked with a nonprofit where we ended up attaching documentation to almost every transaction that we recorded in the books. And basically that was so that if the board or the auditors or anybody had a question about what was going on in this file, we had a piece of supporting documentation so that they didn't have to ask unnecessary questions. So let's walk through how we can actually attach documentation to our transactions in QuickBooks Online. There are a few different ways to go about this. So first, in any type of transaction that you're creating, an invoice, a sales receipt, a bill, you can actually attach documentation right there. So I'm going to go to New Bill here. And I'm actually going to go ahead and enter a bill into QuickBooks so that we can work through this example. So the bill that I have is for PG&E, which I put in as Pacific Gas and Electric Company. And the bill date is 10/27 of 2025. So I'm going to enter the due date as well because it is different in this case. Whoops. And we have here utilities, electricity. This is all correct except the billing period is different. So I am going to go ahead and update that. So it is for 9/27/2025 through 10/26/2025. Okay. And of course the dollar amount is different than the last bill that I entered as well. That's all to be expected. So in order to attach documentation to this bill, you can see right here, I have the ability to add attachments. Okay. Now, like I said, you can attach multiple different document types to this particular transaction. PDFs are the easiest and in my experience have the highest success rate, mostly because they usually come well under this particular file size requirement. Okay. But I also have instances where I've attached Excel documents as well, if that's something that is necessary to support a journal entry or anything like that. You cannot attach numbers. So if you're a Mac user, you would have to convert that file into an Excel file before you could attach it, but you can still attach it. So in order to add this attachment, I can either click Add Attachment and then browse for it, or I can actually drag and drop the document in there. Now you'll see the attachment shows up right here, and I actually have renamed this file so that it indicates what it's for. Now, if you're going to be using this as a system, I do recommend coming up with a naming mechanism for your supporting documentation so that it is clear what it is for, so that when you're going and attaching items, it's quick and easy, okay? Now, what's cool about that is if I click on this, it's going to pop out in a new window and I'm going to get to see all the detail of what makes up this transaction that I have just entered. Okay. So also when I save it and when it shows up in my bank register, it's going to have an attachment associated with it. And so anytime this transaction comes up, people could click there and see exactly what this transaction is for. I'm going to go ahead and hit save and close here. Now, you can attach documents in a couple other places, so I do want to show you that as well. They all mostly look the same. So if I go into a journal entry, for example, Journal entries, of course, do look a bit different than bills, but we can see right here, I still have that same add attachments box. I also have this in places like invoices and sales receipts. Now, for invoices or sales receipts, you might be attaching something like a receipt where you're requesting reimbursement from one of your clients. Okay. Now, there are a couple of other places that we can attach supporting documentation. As far as things like receipts, there actually is a separate receipts feature in QuickBooks, and I will be doing a video about that a little bit later on. But you can also attach documentation directly in the bank feed, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So we would navigate to our bank feed, either by going to our bookmarked bank transactions or by clicking on accounting, and then bank transactions is what comes up first. Now, if I wanted to add supporting documentation, say to this Amazon transaction, well, first I would want to make sure that it's going to the correct vendor here and that I have the correct expense account associated with this transaction. I do have both of those, which is great. Now you can see right here, I have the option to click upload right here, and I could attach a document to this particular transaction. And when I post it to my books, that documentation is going to follow that transaction forward. However, there's actually another cool thing that I can do here. If I already have this expanded and you can see I have this $48 transaction popped out, as it were, I can actually take the PDF or the supporting documentation and I can drag it from my folder here, and you see how that whole box turned green? If I drag and then drop this transaction, it's going to, or this document rather, it's going to automatically attach it to this transaction. So when I post it, it's going to show up there. Okay. Now, since I have that in, since it is for office supplies, I'm going to go ahead and click post right here. And now I want to show you how this transaction is actually going to show up in my bank register. So I'm going to go over to the bank register, and that Amazon transaction was back in November. So I am going to have to scroll just a touch here. But let's see where to go. There it is. So here is this Amazon transaction. Okay. If I click edit here, I can see there is that attachment, and it actually shows me the attachment on the side menu here. So like I said, this will really cut down on questions that people who are viewing your file from the outside might have. And this is also a really great tool if you, as the business owner, might be a little bit forgetful about what you purchased and want to have support for it down the road. Okay. One last thing I will show you here is if I close that transaction and go back to the bank feed, you can actually change this a little bit. And if I click here and then click this little box that says attachment, so I went to the baby gear icon versus the big gear icon, baby gear icon, and then I'm going to select attachments. Once I do that, this other column shows up, and it will show me if there is an attachment associated with that transaction. So now when I scroll back down to that Amazon transaction, I can see that it's showing me there is actually an attachment associated with that particular transaction. Now, one other place in your books that you can attach documentation, and I highly recommend doing so, is in your reconciliation screen. You can attach bank statements, loan statements, credit card statements to your reconciliations by going into your reconciliation screen. And we can do that by going here and clicking reconcile and then selecting history by account in this upper corner. And when I select history by account, I can see when I have reconciled my account, and if there were more reconciliations done, I would see more reconciliations here. But I only have this one reconciliation, and you can see right here I do actually have an attachment with it. So I have added my statement right here, but if I had not added my statement, I would be able to drag and drop or browse and upload my statement here. And that, again, just shores up your books. It provides additional documentation. And so if your CPA is looking over this and has questions at year end, if you are a business or an entity that is subject to audit, you have all of your documentation in one place. It can be a really fantastic resource and tool for you as a small business owner. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Holly from Accrual Mistress Bookkeeping and Consulting. If you have any questions, please do leave those below, and have a lovely day.